You're watching the Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, this is probably one of the craziest episodes of Legal Breakdown that we're going to do. So, we know that Jim Jordan and James Comer, among other Republicans, seized on allegations against Hunter and Joe Biden that were put forward by a guy named Alexander Smirnov. And they pointed to the fact that Smirnov was a confidential source to the DOJ. And so his claims must have been true. They must have been legitimate, right? So, talk about the pretty stunning update that we just got that shows where this breakdown actually occurred.
Yeah, Brian, this is an incredibly tangled Republican web that folks wove, and it's really staggering that at the end of the day, and we're going to go back to the beginning of the day, members of Congress used Russian disinformation as the basis to try to impeach an American president. I mean, how far have we fallen as a government? So here's how it started. This guy, Alexander Smirnov, you can't make that name up, and I'm not going to make jokes like Hunter Biden with a shot of Smirnov, but this guy, Alexander Smirnov, was a longtime FBI human source. Now, what people need to know is that the FBI has lots and lots and lots of sources. I know because over the decades, I was practicing and prosecuting cases, including with the FBI. We used any number of sources or the information provided by sources. But here's the key. When it comes to a human source providing information, the three most important words: corroboration, corroboration, and corroboration. Now, these sources will have all kinds of incentive to just dump lots of information on the FBI, often because they're getting paid for that information. And the FBI will dutifully record every word, whether it's true, whether it's false, whether it's an open question, whether it can be corroborated or not. But importantly, and I think valuably, the FBI will take everything down, and then they will go about trying to figure out what's important, what's credible, what's reliable, what's truthful. Well, over the years, it looks like this Smirnov guy was providing lots of information, and a lot of it turned out to be untruthful, unreliable, incredible. So, but all of it kind of gets dumped into these reports. The reports are called 1023s, which you should think of as completely unverified information. It just came out of the mouth of somebody. And some of what came out of the mouth of Smirnov was, oh, you know what? Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were taking bribes, massive money bribes from Burisma, this Ukrainian energy company. So somehow, rather than having that information vetted for accuracy, it just got passed through a number of hands until it ended up in the hot little hands of two Republican members of Congress, James Comer and Jim Jordan. And they apparently didn't care at all about the truthfulness, the accuracy, the reliability. They just took it, they ran with it, and they used what proved to be Russian disinformation as the basis of an impeachment inquiry. So it went from Smirnov to an FBI agent, and then at some point, Bill Barr gallops in wearing his big black hat. And he says, this is back during the Trump administration, when this information in this 1023 form gets discovered, and it's a parade of horribles about who? Donald Trump's political opponent, Joe Biden. Bill Barr says, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to handpick a Trump loyalist U.S. attorney, a guy named Scott Brady. And I'm going to say, U.S. Attorney Brady, I'd like you to try to verify this information. Brady does whatever Brady does. We don't know yet. And apparently it's verified to his satisfaction, and it ends up being handed off to Congress, not necessarily by Brady, but by the FBI. Now, Director Wray reportedly tried to resist giving this unreliable information to Congress, but he broke down and gave it to them anyway. That seems to me to be a mistake. I think there's more to come on that story.
Yeah.
And after Brady verifies it and provides some behind closed doors testimony to Congress about it, Jim Jordan and James Comer are off to the races saying this is the world's most reliable evidence because it was provided by the FBI, notwithstanding the fact that it turned out to be nothing but Russian lies. So where we are now, Brian, as you say, this is a long, twisted, and tangled web that the Republicans have weaved. All of this has now been exposed, and it seems to me the impeachment inquiry should implode because it was based on Russian disinformation. And Representative Jerry Nadler from New York made a formal ask of the Department of Justice to please investigate this. Importantly, investigate how it is a self-described sort of hardcore Republican loyalist, this U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, who, according to reports, said, you know what, I won't even serve under a Democrat president. And he left the government when Barack Obama got elected, and he came back when Trump got elected as a U.S. attorney. He also appears on the Federalist Society website as a contributor, of course. So Jerry Nadler has said, can you please investigate Scott Brady? Because it looks like there is at least a suggestion that he may have laundered or assisted in laundering Russian disinformation, got it into the hands of Republican members of Congress, and then it was used as the basis of an impeachment. Take party affiliation out of it. The fact that we're going to try to impeach an American president based on Russian disinformation is so obscene and destructive and the exact opposite of what our institutions of government should be about. But that is where we are with this brand new referral by Jerry Nadler, a request for an investigation of the Department of Justice into Scott Brady and the handling of this Russian disinformation.
Just, I mean, insanity. Glenn, what is the recourse if it does ultimately bear itself out that a U.S. attorney, you know, that whose only job basically was to verify the legitimacy of this information, that he failed at that and then basically moved this information forward that would then serve as a predicate to try to impeach an American president? Like, what's the recourse for an attorney like that?
Yeah, so the recourse is kind of twofold. If you read Representative Nadler's referral letter, he refers this for an investigation to both the FBI, the Department of Justice, that would be for a possible criminal probe, and to the Inspector General for the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz. And an Inspector General looks into possible misconduct, even if it's less than criminal misconduct, possible misconduct by DOJ employees. So what is the remedy? Well, first and foremost, if it's investigated per Representative Nadler's request, and I sure hope the Department of Justice doesn't take a blind eye to it, if it's investigated and it is determined that there's any criminal exposure by Scott Brady or anybody else, then I would expect the case to be presented to a grand jury for possible charges. And if there's enough evidence to indict, then I would expect the Department of Justice to seek indictments of anybody who may have committed crimes. The other possible way this will come to a head with accountability for wrongdoers is if Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General, conducts an investigation, finds that there is wrongdoing, though perhaps not quite rising to the level of criminal wrongdoing, it will then be handed off to what's called OPR, the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility, where they will conduct an investigation and they can sanction lawyers up to and including recommending termination from the government in the event they're still in government. So, you know, there are a couple of avenues of accountability that can be pursued. And frankly, I hope both are pursued.
Can I have your reaction to the fact that this Russian disinformation seems to have been laundered at every level of the U.S. government, from a U.S. attorney in the DOJ, whose job it was to, again, verify the legitimacy of this information, right down to sitting members of Congress, to chairmen of powerful committees in Jim Jordan and James Comer, all for the express purpose of hurting Joe Biden politically. Can I have your reaction to that?
Yeah, my reaction is not going to be a happy one. Look, I don't know who laundered it. I don't know who was just negligent in the handling of it, failing to adequately corroborate it and determine whether it's truthful or not. I don't know what decisions went into the FBI just deciding, even though it seems to be unconfirmed and ultimately it was a product of Russian disinformation, just giving it over to Congress without an appropriate court battle to stop this exact thing from happening, cutting it off at the pass. Here's what I do know. It seems that one of the more culpable characters, and I know this is going to shock you and it's going to shock all of our viewers, Brian, one of the most culpable characters seems to be Jim Jordan.
Shocker. Yep.
Why do I say that? And I know, let me let everybody catch their breath.
Yeah, that's right.
I know. Jim Jordan, once it was exposed that Smirnov not only provided Russian disinformation against Donald Trump's political opponent, but he's been criminally indicted for it. And he has admitted to the FBI upon his arrest that, yeah, he was providing false information that was being fed to him by Russian operatives. What does Jim Jordan do? Does he take a step back and say, oh, wait a minute, it looks like the entire basis for our impeachment inquiry just imploded. It looks like what we were trying to do was really a product of Russian lies that had been fed to us. So we need to back off. We need to sort of just discharge this whole impeachment inquiry. No, he doubles down. He says, well, the facts still remain. And I think it was Manu Raju of CNN who said to him, stopped him in his tracks, the facts don't remain because they're not facts. Right. They're Russian lies. Does Jim Jordan care? And, I will not quote, but I will paraphrase something that Representative Daniel Goldman, himself a former federal prosecutor up in New York, said. He said, if the Jim Jordans and the James Comers of the world continue to double down on these lies, they need to be criminally investigated, to which I say, hear, hear.
Yeah, perfectly put. So, Glenn, what happened to Smirnov now, by the way? Because I know that there's a lot of news regarding whether he's been incarcerated, whether he's been let go, whether he's been arrested. Can you give an update on where we're at right now?
Yeah, another sort of funky and unconventional development in this story. So the FBI gets an arrest. The FBI gets an arrest warrant from a federal judge for Smirnov for the lies he told. So there are two charges: one for lying to the FBI, what we call a 1001 false statement charge, and also providing false documents. So he's facing upwards of a couple of decades, at least by the statutory maximum punishment. The federal sentencing guidelines will come in far below that. So a federal judge issues an arrest warrant. He's arrested where he lives at the time in Las Vegas. He's presented to a magistrate judge. That's not a full judge. A magistrate judge handles the lower level hearings, like when a defendant is first arrested. And the question arises and has to be decided, what should the system do with him now that he's been arrested? Should they release him and order him to reappear for his next court hearing? Or should they detain him pending trial because in this instance, he's a flight risk? Now, Smirnov had provided false information to what's called the Pretrial Services Agency upon his arrest. For example, he said during an interview, I only have about $6,500 available, so I don't even have the money to flee the United States. Turns out he has access to more than $6 million. He has really no contacts in the United States. He has lots of contacts overseas. He holds a dual passport. I believe he's a dual citizen, Israel and the United States. So, or Israel and another country, I'm not entirely sure. So there was so much indicia of flight risk that, in my opinion, as a former career prosecutor, he absolutely should have been ordered detained pending his next court appearance. But for whatever reason, the magistrate judge in Las Vegas ordered that he be released and that he have to wear a GPS ankle monitor. Well, he was released, and a day or two later, he was arrested again by the FBI, which is an unusual development. Now, I've had that happen, a defendant on release who gets rearrested, but it's generally because the defendant has committed another crime or because the grand jury has issued what's called a superseding indictment and charged him with more offenses. But neither of those two things seem to have happened. And all of a sudden, he's arrested again. What we just learned, because the case was up in court today, is that a federal judge, a full federal judge, not a magistrate judge in California, where the case originated and will be tried, revisited the issue. He was provided with some additional information, including, importantly, an allegation that Smirnov's lawyers were in the process of perhaps helping him attempt to flee the United States. And that judge said, I am issuing an arrest warrant for him anew. I want him arrested immediately, and I want him brought forthwith to my courtroom so that I can get my case against him started. So he's been rearrested, he's been taken into custody, and just today, he was ordered now detained pending trial because he's clearly a flight risk. So again, this is the most contorted, unusual set of circumstances in any number of ways that I've seen in some time.
Well, I warned everybody that this would be a pretty crazy episode. I think it's important to talk about this stuff, though, even though it is so convoluted, because I mean, at its core, this is the basis for an effort by Republicans to launder Russian disinformation to try and impeach a Democratic president in the United States. I mean, just like, I know we get normalized to so much of this stuff, but like there's or that we adapt to so much of this stuff, but this can't become normalized. And so I think that Republicans are probably relying on the fact that this is so convoluted so that nobody will talk about it. But it's absolutely worth talking about. The implications here could not be bigger. And, this is something that we'll definitely follow along with as we continue to get updates here. And all the while, we should make sure that everybody is as educated on this as we can possibly be, so that Jim Jordan can't move forward with it. I mean, to your exact point, he doesn't care whether all of this stuff was debunked, because he's hoping that people don't know enough, because it is so convoluted, so nebulous, and that he can continue barreling forward with these allegations against Joe Biden anyway. But the more people that know the truth, the more people that understand all of this stuff, the harder it'll be for Jim Jordan to keep pushing this disinformation forward.
And Brian, why does it become normalized? Why is Jim Jordan in a position to continue to try to kill our democracy from within? Because we have not addressed Jim Jordan's crimes. For example, when he defied a congressional subpoena, when he was subpoenaed to testify to Congress and provide information to the January 6th committee, and by extension to the American people, about the crimes of Donald Trump, he said, I'm not going to do it. I am instead going to commit the crime of contempt of Congress in my determination to keep hidden from the American people evidence about the crimes of Donald Trump. And what did the Department of Justice do about it? Squat. And that is why Jim Jordan is in a position to continue to abuse his power and authority as a member of Congress, to interfere, to use congressional committees to interfere in state court prosecutions to Donald Trump's advantage, like up in New York and down in Georgia, or to put together these idiotic committees on the weaponization of the Department of Justice, when he is the one who is weaponizing Congress in a way that is an abuse of his congressional authority and power. And the reason he continues to get to do it is because the institutions of government are not holding him accountable for it. Let's see if they choose to hold him accountable for now using Russian disinformation to try to impeach an American president.
Yeah, all of which, by the way, to your exact point, underscores the importance of us continuing to talk about this stuff, of everybody in the progressive media ecosystem continuing to talk about this stuff, and not giving Jim Jordan a free pass and putting pressure on these prosecutors at the DOJ, on the Merrick Garlands of the world, who have seen Jim Jordan engage in this kind of behavior and have opted to do nothing, because God forbid we have the optics of a politicized DOJ. All the while, look what he's doing. If that's not politicized, I don't know what is. So with that said, again, we'll stay on top of this stuff. For everybody watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
This is The Legal Breakdown.